together to dream of a kinder world. In Minnow Pride, in our adult Sunday school classes, in small groups, in Palestine meetings, in the virtual versions of these trainings, in our conversations with people who've never felt fully seen in the church until now. I've seen hearts open, minds change, and communities grow ever stronger. And all that comes from the same spirit that fuels Mennonite Action today, the conviction that love and justice are not and never have been separate things. When we organize and when we act, we remind each other that despair is not acceptable and not our goal. Hope takes work. It's built by people willing to keep showing up again and again, even when the world tells us it's pointless. So for me, MC Action is about practicing resurrection, bringing light and love into the most ignored corners of our world, not through force, but through presence and through community, through listening, through courage, through refusal to give up on each other, no matter how things look and how dark they may be. That's why I stay involved. That's why I, and I'm sure many of you others here, are here today. Because I believe in the sacred power of people, ordinary people like you and me, choosing to do something extraordinary together, something bigger than any of us. And if we can hold on to that, if we can keep choosing love, then maybe we can still become the kind of world that we pray every day for. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. And now I'd like to invite Paul to come up and say a few words about his time with the Freedom Flotilla.
So many of you know I was on the Global Samud Flotilla, which is a nonviolent coalition of civilians that sailed boats all the way across the Mediterranean to try to break the illegal Israeli siege of Gaza peacefully. Israel chose to not be peaceful in its response to that, and they intercepted all of our boats, and as they've done many times in the past, but we had many boats. There were dozens of them. There were 473 people across all of those boats, and these are like sailing yachts. Anyway, they took us into the prison system, and they treated us poorly. That's really an understatement. I would say that they treated us like hardened or people that had committed serious violent crimes. But even that is not, like, there would be a place for that potentially, but this is almost a vindictive, sort of retributive sort of attitude that they had toward us. And in that environment, I was standing next to someone, a man actually from Mexico, and I told him, I feel like they just treat us like animals. And he said, I know, it's so sad, and actually I actually feel sorry for them. And then he said, I actually feel like it's moving me to have compassion on them. And I felt actually a little bit like judging my own sort of outlook toward these people, because when you are treated in dehumanizing ways, you want to dehumanize them. And I think that attitude, it doesn't absolve anyone from guilt for the crimes that they commit against people or anything, but I think that attitude, I also thought about this community, and I think that's what's beautiful about Mennonites is trying to see, not just to dehumanize the enemy, but to try to remember that we're all humans and broken. So, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for your courage and commitment and for calling us into both action and compassion. Thank you. I'll ask Crystal to come up and lead us in our next song, Calm Me, Lord.
This is number 680 in your hymnal, 680. We'll let the instruments play through it once, and then we will sing it through twice. And on the second time, notice we go to the last line. So.
All right, for the next 20 minutes or so, we are going to talk about this political moment that we're in, this moment of rising authoritarianism nationally and globally, and what can we do about it as people of faith? What's our role in resisting authoritarianism? So we see authoritarianism, two twin theologies, as holding up, propping up this rising authoritarianism in the United States. And those two theologies being Christian nationalism and Christian Zionism. So just to quickly define them, Christian Zionism meaning the theology that is underpinning Israel's genocidal violence, it's justifying the mass displacement of Palestinians by claiming it's all part of God's plan for Jews to return to the Holy Land and bring about the end times. So that's this idea of Christian Zionism. And then at the same time, domestically, we've got this idea similarly called Christian nationalism, which is a theology that justifies violence and exclusion against migrants and marginalized communities by framing them as threats to God's plan for America. And so other manifestations of Christian nationalism include xenophobia, indigenous erasure, anti-black racism, transphobia, and more. And so we see ICE deportations in the US and Israel's genocidal violence in Gaza as intertwined, right? Intertwined systems of racial violence. And so as the US is funding Israel's mass displacement and genocide of Palestinians, while also deporting migrants at home, we see both countries collaborating and upholding these systems together. And so we're thinking about, while all of this is happening, what is our role? What do we do about this as Anabaptists and Mennonites? And so we think it's time to step into our faith tradition, to lift up our voices for peace and justice, and uplift a different vision of Christianity that believes in liberation for all people. And here in our 500th year of Anabaptism, that we ground ourselves in that history, in that faith tradition of non-cooperation with state religion and oppressive governments. And we remember that Jesus' own life and commitment to nonviolence. And we remember that Jesus threatened the Roman Empire and opposed imperial theology. He preached and embodied a new world order, the kingdom of God, where the last shall be first and the first shall be last.
So that's to ground us. We're grounding us today in why are we here and what is this moment that we're in? And now we're actually going to start exploring what is authoritarianism. And before I get into it, I want to say that I'm part of this network called the Freedom Trainers. And I went to a training led by them in May, and at this training were people from unions, there were federal workers. These folks are leading trainings for members of Congress, all kinds of different organizations, and all the trainings are asking people the same question: what can your community do to resist rising authoritarianism in the United States? And so the training is to support people to think through that. So I went to that training and I asked myself, what can my community do? What can Mennonites and Anabaptists and Christians do in this moment where we have rising authoritarianism in the US and globally? And so I went there and I then adapted this training that we're now taking on tour and that we're presenting to you this evening. So we're starting out just by defining what authoritarianism is. So a really simple definition is that it's the concentration of power in the hands of a small group of people, and that power is maintained through repression and threats or acts of violence. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Okay, yes. So it feels like this is increasing here in the US. So we're going to go through what political scientists or civil resistance scholars call the authoritarian playbook. And so this is a checklist. If they were to analyze any country in the world to see, is this country have rising authoritarianism? This is the checklist that they would use. So we're going to go through it together. The first one is authoritarians direct investigations against their critics. Can anyone think of an example of this happening in the US? You could just yell it out. Comey? Letitia James? Yeah, I'm hearing more that, there's a bunch of different examples we can think of. Okay, giving license to law breaking. Use of force, illegal force. Yes, pardoning J6ers, that's a really important one. Yeah, sending the National Guard in, yep. ICE overreach. Regulatory retaliation. Jimmy Kimmel, yes. Using the power of the state to pressure companies to fire their employees. Harvard, yes. Yep, absolutely. Was that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, how about just firing federal workers that maybe disagree with the administration? Yep, punishing sanctuary states or sanctuary cities. Yes, weaponizing, shutting down the government. Deploying the military domestically. This one is so on the nose that maybe we don't need to shout out some examples right now, right? So, yep, this is happening. Federal law enforcement overreach, right? So, once again, ICE being sent, ramping up ICE hirings, ICE wearing masks, lots of examples of this we could think of. Yes, massive budget increase. And saying, I'm not going to leave office. That sound familiar too? Okay, so unfortunately we're checking all the boxes right now. And so when I first saw this list, it made me feel kind of scared and overwhelmed. But then I also kind of weirdly felt some relief because it made me feel like, okay, I'm not going crazy, right? This really is happening, and I have evidence. I know that political scholars are saying this is what's happening, and I can know that this is real. Does anyone else feel that way? Okay, so it's just some confirmation that what we're experiencing is really happening. So we just went through just broadly, what do authoritarians do? And now we're just going to think about what does that actually mean? What's the threat for our country or for any democracy? So political scientists use this term called backsliding. So backsliding refers to a democracy that is sliding towards authoritarianism. That's what backsliding means. And unfortunately, in their studies, civil resistance scholars found that in almost 100 cases of democratic backsliding, 68% of them broke down into full-on authoritarianism. So that's not a very heartening statistic. But if we shrink the timeline down, so instead of it being in the last 100 years, a little over 100 years, to just the last 30 years, over half of the cases did a U-turn. So they were starting to break down into authoritarianism, they did a U-turn, and they got out of it. They went to being a democracy. They were able to become a democracy again. And the number one factor, the key factor that turned it around was if there was a nonviolent civil resistance movement in that country. Okay? Nonviolent civil resistance movement. The nonviolent piece was actually extremely important, and I'm not assigning a moral judgment to that, but just from their research, a nonviolent movement was more likely to be successful. And when I say civil resistance movement, we're talking about anyone from faith communities to labor unions to businesses to legal workers, and sometimes it means you're teaming up with people that you don't even like that much, right? So you're in this broad coalition, and you're all working together to defeat authoritarianism. You guys with me so far? Okay. So in those countries, in the last 30 years that we just talked about, if they had no civil resistance movement, they had a 7.5% chance of turning it around and becoming a democracy if they had no movement. If they had one, they had a 52%, 51.7% chance. So it really matters. It really matters. And so to me, that just drives home the point that everyday people, all of us just getting involved and doing our part, it actually really matters a lot, and it really is going to matter at key moments. And we're going to get into what those key moments are. So just to drive that point home, the key factor, the number one factor in defeating authoritarianism is if there is a non-violent civil resistance movement involved in stopping it, that everyday people are part of. So, how do we do this? What does it actually mean to be involved in one of these movements? So, I don't know about you guys, but it feels like every day I wake up and I read the news and some other really awful thing has happened, and it feels like I don't have the power to change what's happening. Does anyone else also feel that way? Okay, great. I'm glad I'm not the only one. So that's one way. And it's a pretty easy way for us to think about our power. We can think of that as the traditional view of power, but there's another way that we can think about it. If we flip that power triangle upside down, so instead of thinking about power coming down, if we flip the triangle upside down, we can think about this thing called the pillars of support. And the idea is that across all of society, there are different sectors of people, and they're holding up the government. They're holding up people in power. And so some of those pillars are faith institutions, unions or workers, media outlets, the police, political parties, the military, universities. So I'm curious, what do you guys think would happen if 3 of those pillars withdrew their support completely? What would what would happen to the triangle? Yeah, it'd probably crumble or tip over. Or if just a few of them got much weaker, it would become unstable. And I see some folks taking photos of the slides, and you're more than welcome to do that, but we can also send out the slide deck to everyone as well. And so to me, when I saw this, it helped me to clarify what my role would be. So if I think of myself, I'm someone that is part of a faith institution, I consider myself part of the faith pillar, so I need to organize people in my community to withdraw my support at a key moment. So we know that this isn't just going to happen, right? It's going to take work, but at key moments, people need to withdraw their support and say, no, I'm not going to do this. And so just to give one example, in Serbia, under the dictator that they used to have there was a moment where the police were called to fire on protesters at a demonstration, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it at that key moment, and I don't think they knew ahead of time that they weren't going to do it, but they were called on to do it, and they didn't do it, and that had ripple effects, right? Because all of a sudden the police had disobeyed an order from the highest levels of government, and they started defecting from the government, and at that key moment, it was one thing that helped to bring down the dictatorship. And so for us, we can think about at a key moment in our city or our community, if we were asked to do something that we don't support, or if something was happening we don't support, what's our role going to be in saying no and refusing to cooperate? So that's the question that we're going to explore together tonight. So I've been talking about this idea of non-cooperating, and so just to define it, non-cooperation is the act of refusing to cooperate or comply with requests, demands, or orders. And we're thinking about our role and our responsibility as Mennonites and Christians who are part of faith communities, and we see ourselves as part of a constituency of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people across the country, but to make it more tangible, just like people of faith here in Portland. And so we've got a responsibility to organize other people of faith and to ask them to also remove their support at key moments. So how do we start doing that? It starts just thinking about our own position in our community and who we have connections to, who we can map out and think about asking them to join with us, or who we can join with. Maybe there's other people doing the work that we want to join alongside. And so I keep saying this word key moments, like at a certain point in time, this is going to become particularly important. And so another word for these key moments is something called a red line. Has anyone heard this term before? Red line? Okay. So does anyone feel like every day it seems like things keep getting a little worse, like another line just got crossed that we didn't think was going to get crossed? Okay, so we can define that as a red line, and I think that Mennonite Action formed in response to one of those red lines, the genocide in Gaza beginning. So we formed and started organizing because it felt like, yes, things in Palestine have been bad and even getting worse for a long time, but this was unprecedented. This level of violence, this genocide, had just escalated to a level we hadn't seen before, and so we started this organization. And but the thing is, it's still happening, and we haven't had the power to stop it. And that's what keeps happening if we don't have the power to stop things. The people in power just keep going further and further. And so the answer to how we stop the red lines from happening is that we have to organize. We have to organize ourselves more. And we have to think about it not just on the national scale, but also on the local scale. And so I like to use this tool called the spectrum of allies, or sometimes we call it the spectrum of support. Sometimes when I'm feeling especially cynical, I think about how there's so many people that really don't agree with me, and I'll never be able to convince them to not believe the things that they believe. Does that feel familiar to anyone else? Okay, so this chart can be helpful for me in those moments because it reminds me that my goal is actually just to move people one section over. So to define these sections, we've got, and these are, once again, not moral labels, but just thinking about what I believe, there are people way over on the other side, the active opposition, that are actively organizing against what I believe. And then there are people in the passive opposition that disagree with me, but maybe they're not doing much about it. Then there's people in the middle who aren't really sure where they stand. There's the neutral folks. Then we've got lots of people that agree with me, but they're not doing too much about it. And then we've got, I'm going to put all of us in the active part just because we showed up today. And so our goal really is just to move people one section over, rather than focusing on that section way over there. And actually the three most important sections are neutral, passive allies, and active allies. So just from like a political science level, if we increase the number of people that are actively involved and in the streets at key moments, that is the tipping point in whether or not we can push back or stop authoritarianism. If we could like increase our numbers from 1% of the population to 3 or 4% of the population. And so that feels much more tangible to me. I can talk to my friends that are on the sidelines and not getting involved, or I can talk to folks who don't know where they stand. Does that make sense? Okay, makes things a little more tangible. So as we're thinking about what the next red line might be in our communities, we know that we just want our response to be stronger. We want to feel more prepared and more courageous. And instead of acting out of reaction, we want to act proactively, right? We want to act out of our values. And when we're just responding to what's happening, we're acting reactively, and we're not able to ground ourselves. So instead, we're trying to prepare and act proactively. So I've been just talking really conceptually so far, and so I wanted to name a more concrete example of what it could look like to non-cooperate. And to do that, I'll talk about my own community. So I'm from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and my sheriff just signed a cooperation agreement with ICE. And so now the sheriff's department is sharing information and getting trained by ICE. The sheriff, if he wanted to, could even deputize people, and then all of a sudden they would be cooperating with ICE. This is happening at sheriff's departments all across the country. And so I started imagining, what if my sheriff's department did something that I totally disagree with, like arrested the mayor of my city, or supported ICE to do a raid on the high school in my city? What would my community be able to do about that? So some of the things that I thought about, if like a raid happened on the high school where they were trying to get undocumented kids, detained undocumented kids, what if teachers went on strike and said, we are out on strike until this cooperation agreement is broken? What if students went out and did a walkout and did the same thing? And I know at the church that I go to in Lancaster, we've got a lot of students from all across the county that are in our church youth group, and we could support them to be organizing in their high schools. What if taxpayers refused to pay school taxes or county taxes? What if we had to boycott specific businesses that were cooperating with ICE? So these are all examples that I could think of how I might be involved in non-cooperation locally. So to lay the groundwork for this, we have to do a lot of the same things that probably many of us are already involved with in this room, and that's just grassroots organizing, like asking pastors of your church and different churches to write op-eds together to build relationships, like asking churches to do accompaniment work with immigrants, like holding trainings like this, holding potlucks across communities. So a lot of community building and getting people together that aren't currently talking to one another. And one exercise that I think would be really tangible for this community or any community to do is just to sit down for an afternoon and map out what relationships you have with other organizations and other community leaders. Think about who holds what relationships, what organizations do you wish you were working with that you don't have relationships with, and what do you need to do to build relationships with them? So now I just want to get into a few more concrete examples of non-cooperation. And the first one that I like to give is the Montgomery bus boycott, because it literally was Black people in the South organizing against authoritarianism. Because the Jim Crow South was racialized authoritarianism, was white supremacist authoritarian system inside of our own country. And so Black people in the South organized the Montgomery bus boycott when a red line happened, when Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to go to the back of the bus. And so what did people do? They boycotted, they non-cooperated, refused to use the bus system. They organized mutual aid systems through ride shares, providing food and resources to one another so that they could resist and not ride the bus. And they won. They endured violence and hardship, but they won. Another example was just last year in South Korea. Has anyone heard of this example? Yeah, so just last year in South Korea, the president declared martial law. And millions of people hit the streets. Churches held huge worship services in the streets protesting this. And unions held a general strike, and they managed to turn it around. So they're one of the examples of a country that did a U-turn when authoritarianism was starting to be institutionalized. And the military, we learned afterwards, the military was planning on following orders. And so the thing that stopped them was people in the streets. And they felt like they had to, they couldn't go along with it because they didn't have the power to overcome just sheer numbers of people. And then for those of us that are Mennonites or Anabaptists in the room, we have some courage to draw upon, right? Our history of conscientious objectors refusing to cooperate, refusing to go to war, and we can draw on that history and learn those lessons, learn from those lessons to draw on for courage today. So just to ground ourselves and remind ourselves, we are part of a movement that's much larger than our community, much larger than this one city, of millions of people who are training and preparing for this moment that we're in. And so when I gave this training 2 days ago in San Francisco, someone said to me, you know, someone else gave a really similar training to 2,000 people just a week ago. And so lots of people from different communities are training and preparing for these moments together. I want to speak about one more complement to non-cooperation, which is called mutual aid. And I just mentioned it a moment ago during the Montgomery bus boycott. And the idea is that if you're going to do something as bold as refusing to use an entire system, like refusing to ride the bus, then you have to support one another to do that. You have to build a system to support one another, especially in times when the government either is actively repressing you or when the government is refusing to give you support. And so creating these mutual aid systems for one another is something that we can do, and it's also an entry point for folks that are not ready to hit the streets themselves. And so just to point out one example, this is a photo of someone named Geraldine Ebersol. She was a Mennonite Central, Community worker in 1951. She traveled to Palestine to give direct relief to Palestinians. So it's a photo of her giving clothing to women for their infants. She's still living today. She lives in Lancaster and goes to Akron Mennonite Church. And I like to give this example because people like Geraldine Ebersol, who built these initial relationships between Mennonites and Palestinians, laid the groundwork for all of us to be doing this Palestine solidarity work today. And I think it's a clear reason why Mennonites have been the most active Christian denomination in organizing against the genocide for the last 2 years. Okay, so I just want to run through a few lessons, some takeaways from this slideshow. So the first thing that we can do when we're thinking about organizing against authoritarianism is just understand the gravity of the moment that we're in and help other people to understand it. We can prepare our churches to give direct support and create mutual aid structures. We continue mobilizing. So I know sometimes I'm like, should I really show up to the No King's Day demonstration or whatever demonstration? Like, does it really matter? But if I think about it as practice for mobilizing for moments that really matter, that helps me to think about it in a different way, especially if I think about it in terms of like the intention that I show up with. Like, I'm going to show up to be a de-escalator, or I'm going to show up with this specific role in mind, and I'm going to ask people to come with me because this is practice for a moment that could be more serious in the future. I think we have to keep making the connection between Palestine and what's happening here, because it's two systems of authoritarianism that rely on one another, and organizing against one helps the other system to also get weaker. We have to keep training ourselves with our skills. We have to keep organizing and talking to our neighbors and using that spectrum of support to move people one section over. And to do all this, we have to rely on our source of courage. So for me, that's my belief in a God of justice. That's relying on our history and on our faith as Anabaptists and Christians. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Emily for the next section. And for our hander-outer folks, if you guys could hand out our non-cooperation sheets right now.
Okay, everyone, how are we doing? Woo! We're going to have a chance to move around. So here is what we're going to do next. So Nick just laid the framework to understand some concepts of non-cooperation and mutual aid, and now we're going to have a chance to apply it to a real situation that is made up. So I'm going to read a scenario that is not real, and this is also on your paper that you will soon receive, and we're going to split up into some groups and discuss some questions. So here is the scenario. So your local sheriff, Sheriff Wilkerson, signs an agreement to cooperate with ICE. The sheriff immediately appoints and deputizes 25 people and his deputies. These deputized agents attempt to force local schools, businesses, and nonprofits to cooperate and coordinate with them. The deputized ICE agents don't just increase raids locally against undocumented people, they also build infrastructure to scale up repression and surveillance against activists, Palestinians, Arab Americans, and progressives. So your church, Bangor Anabaptist Fellowship, we made this up, this is not real, decides to think about, number one, how it might non-cooperate and support others to non-cooperate with ICE, and number two, how to provide mutual aid and direct support to those impacted community members. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the church in half. So this group over here, you all are going to talk about non-cooperation. You all over here are going to talk about mutual aid, and within that, within your side, split into groups of about 4, let's say 5. So find a group of 5, and then find the connected questions under your group. So if you flip over to the back, there's questions about non-cooperation for those folks, questions about mutual aid for those folks. Yes, and then up here, as well as on your sheet, here is some more info about what you know about who attends your church. So you have 7 youth group members who attend the local county high school. 4 members of your church have close relationships with the local Palestinian community and the local Islamic Center through the last 2 years of organizing with Mennonite Action. 1 member of your church is a police officer. 4 members of your church have learned action planning skills by participating in Mennonite Action, trainings, and other grassroots movements. 1 member of your church is the bookkeeper at a local food bank, and you don't know that much info about the other members, but maybe you could find out. Okay, so go ahead and split up with find a group of 5, address those questions, and we'll give some time prompts as we are pulling folks back together.
got about 5 minutes left, 5 minutes.
Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Let's wrap up our conversations, and we are going to do some discussing. So, as a reminder, as a former theater person, we have stage left, who was non-cooperation. Stage right was mutual aid. So let's start by focusing on non-cooperation. Just curious to hear from a group or two, what would you consider, in your situation, what were you all considering a local red line or an all-out moment for Bangor? What would a moment look like when people all across Bangor were ready to hit the streets? Go ahead.
When the sheriff's department stands between people and getting food at the food bank, actually forming a barrier between people getting fed, that would be a red line.
Thank you. So when that moment was affecting the wellness of people, thanks for sharing. Maybe another group? Mike's coming back to y'all.
We said the sheriff signing the agreement.
Sheriff signing agreement.
Cooperate in the first place. Yeah.
So you saw where that could go, and you said, let's stop that red line there. Thank you. And one more?
We talked about something that affects children in a really hard way and has a possibility to get more people frustrated.
Affecting children, yes. Thank you. Great, well, let's bump over to the mutual aid side. So for you all, how will you learn more about which church members have connections to different communities? How are you going to go about learning what skills your church members have?
We said inviting people to be part of small groups and what else? Sunday school, meals with each other.
Love it. So building some connections and relationships.
We talked a lot about similarly, potlucks, and creating community engagement. One of the big things was inspiring people to start early and stay late with activities. So engage in your church and your church events beyond just like the designated times. Stay in community, stay within relation with people. We talked about like a more organic way to do like skills arrays. So like figuring out like different skills and discernments and abilities and resources people in your church have, but doing that by fostering like tight relationships, making sure that like if you don't know someone, you know someone that knows someone, and just like furthering those connections so you can mobilize at the drop of a hat when needed and know where to find someone when needed.
Thank you. So I heard skills, I heard relationships, heard consistency. So great. So let's jump back over to non-cooperation. Well, anyone else from this side? Before we jump over, yes.
Oh, sorry.
I saw that hand first, but then we'll get you next.
So we actually just copied off of what you had on one of your slides, the little grid of just going through and mapping out on an afternoon what connection someone has in the church, like getting people together and going through that exercise.
I love that. Yeah, someone had the idea at one of our trainings of holding like a church job fair, or kind of, this is what I have to offer.
A talent show is what we
Yeah,
also call
or
it.
talent show, but with what skills you want to offer over here.
Yeah, let's take this one over here.
Well, it will never replace relationships, but do a survey, gather everything, and centralize it and get a database together.
I love that. Thank you. So much more that we could all discuss. So I know this is really the beginning. But again, this was a situation to get it in our brains. And sometimes it's helpful to have it be fictional, just so we can sort of be as objective as possible as we're thinking about this. And now we have another opportunity to see what it's like, but now more in our bodies. So Nick is going to introduce that.
So what we're about to do is action role play. Next one. Okay.
So we're about to do an action role play where we're actually going to practice with our bodies taking action together. But before we do that, I just want to talk about the concept of risk. Like actually, will you go back one real fast? Just the concept of like taking risk together in this moment, because I think all of us in the room probably feel differently about how much we are willing to risk. And then also in the room or even across our city, people are at risk in different ways. So depending what your own experiences in life are, you might feel more triggered, or you might have experienced more harm at the hands of different systems. And also depending on your racial identity or your gender or your sexuality or a lot of other factors, you might be more likely to experience risk when taking action. And so, so as you're thinking about taking action, just take a moment to think about what you feel like you could do. And also remember that the person sitting next to you might have a different experience than you. And so part of our job is not just thinking about ourselves as individuals, but our job is taking care of our whole community, right? It's because people in power want to split us up, and they want us to feel alone. And so our responsibility is to hold each other as whole people and to take care of one another. And so we're going to use a concept called comfort, discomfort, and alarm zone. Has anyone heard of this before? The idea is that where we learn the best is in our discomfort zone. So when we get a little bit uncomfortable, we can kind of shake ourselves up and we can learn more about ourselves. But if we get pushed too far, we go into our alarm zone, and that's like the flight or fight response, and that's too far. And so in today's role play, our goal is to push ourselves just a little bit into our discomfort zone without going into our alarm zone. And so I want folks to think about how they're going to show up in the role play, and to be aware and to take care of yourself. We're not going to do anything too intense, but just want folks to kind of be aware and to be thinking about how can I get a little uncomfortable but not too far. And then even more importantly, in real life, what we hope to learn in a role play like this is we're not going to be like prescribing a tactic saying like this role play is exactly what we think you should be doing. Instead, we hope that this is a way to learn a little bit how we might respond in a slightly more intense protest scenario, because if you learn like, ooh, I get frozen, or I am suddenly the loudest voice in the room, when I'm at an action, that can help you in real life to be like, ooh, I'm starting to act that way again. I need to do this thing to center myself. Or maybe I shouldn't be in this role if I'm someone who wants to get into a lot of conflict with the police. I didn't know that was going to be a reaction of mine. Does that make sense? So we're pushing our boundaries a little bit in a safe way, and we're kind of preparing our bodies and our minds and our hearts to be able to take action in the future. Okay, so I'm going to read this scenario aloud, and then what I want us to do together is to imagine if we actually were planning this demonstration together, what roles would we need to have planned for beforehand? So our scenario is that we're still in Bangor, Maine. By the way, I did watch a YouTube video on how to pronounce Bangor, and that is how they say it, just so you guys know. ICE raids a local high school while it is in session, and they take undocumented students and even kids with green cards to the local county jail. Some of these students are members of the local Islamic Center. ICE threatens to deport them and their families, and they also call Palestinian American families radicals or terrorists. So this is not too far off from reality right now, unfortunately. Your church with the relationships that it has built with the Islamic Center, partially through the organizing work for Palestine that it's done in the last couple years, is in a unique position because you've built these relationships. So can we go to the next slide? Thank you. And one more. Thanks. So the high school students, I was actually talking about an example like this earlier today. The high school students at your church decide that they want to help lead a walkout in a student strike. And one of the slogans that they use is "Stop targeting Palestinians, immigrants are welcome here." And so they want to do this in solidarity with these students that are being held at the county jail. So your church supports the students in the student youth group in the church youth group to organize these walkouts, and also says, you know what, we want to show up in support of the students at their protests outside the county jail, and you hope that if your church shows up as a church congregation, it could be an invitation for other churches to show up, or even other institutions and community leaders. Okay, that's our scenario. Is that making sense to folks, that scenario? Okay. So if we were to hold a demonstration like this, what roles would we wanted to have prepared and decided beforehand? Folks can just shout them out. How to communicate, yes, like a communications team, a communications plan. De-escalators, what does a de-escalator do? Yeah, keep things from getting violent or aggressive, maybe even paying attention to specific people that could show up and be escalated. What other roles? Medics, absolutely. Traffic control or marshal is another word for that, absolutely. Spokesperson, what if the media shows up? Who's going to talk to the media? Transportation, who's going to give people rides? Yeah, water, snacks, and for people of the church, but also these students that are doing the demonstration. Like, what if these students are doing a sit-in? Do they need some kind of support and encouragement? Yeah, so these are all great examples. How about a police liaison? Like, who's going to talk to the police if they show up? Yes, that's a really good point. So if people were to get arrested, do we have lawyers that are ready? Do we have a jail support system? So all of these are roles that we could be training ourselves in as a community, and they're also roles that we could, in demonstrations that are happening here in Portland, we could show up and be offering some of these roles to others. So today in our role play, we're just going to be focusing on the roles that are happening in the current moment. So a lot of folks were naming like support structure roles, like lawyers or jail support. We're just focusing on this moment. And I think we have some folks in the room that actually have already volunteered to play some roles. So if you're planning on being a de-escalator, can you raise your hand? All right, we've got a de-escalator in the room. Round of applause. Thank you. Do we have a police liaison in the room? All right, in the back, thank you. Do we have any spokespeople? Anyone willing to talk to the media? All right, thank you. How about a song leader? Anyone? Yes, we've got a song leader. Do we have a social media person? Anyone posting on the socials? All right, thank you. Do we have a member of the media present? Thank you, Art. I heard a rumor that there is a provocateur in the room today. You do, yeah. Okay, we have a provocateur. And I think there might be a police officer as well in the room. I'm going to play a police officer as well. Okay. What's that? No. Oh, okay, marshals. All right, we've got marshals as well. Okay, so everyone knows their roles, and what we're going to do now is split. Oh, and so raise your hand if you don't have a role today. Okay, so everyone that doesn't have a role is going to be just a member of the church. that's showing up in support of the students. And I forgot the students. Raise your hand if you're a student. We've got our high school students. All right, nice. So if you are a member, if you are a high school student, a police officer, a member of the media, or a provocateur, you're going to come with me and we're going to be in the back. And then everyone else is going to be hanging out with Emily up here.
Okay. Great. So church folks and then all the support roles, de-escalator, liaison, social media, song leader, come on up. Students are back with Nick. So, you are Marshall, right? Are you you're the Marshal? Yep, you stay here. Okay, so church folks, let's gather in. Bangor Anabaptist Fellowship congregants. Not use the mic? Okay, we're too loud for those. Okay, so here, church members.
Great job, everybody. All right, let's start by giving a round of applause to our police officers and provocateurs. That's a hard role to play. Doesn't feel good to be the cop in that scenario. I want to start off by asking our students, how did it feel? We're going to do some analyzing in a minute of like what went well, what could have gone better. But just first of all, how did it feel to be in the role that you were playing? Do any students want to speak to that? How did it feel?
It was really intimidating at first, even though the police officers are kind of smiling the whole time.
What was intimidating about
it? It was, I mean, you're in high school, if you're a young person, and I don't know, I didn't feel like, we were a really small group, and it felt like being only the 7 people, there's a little bit of like we're the outliers and we're the only people who are really standing up, but then it felt like a really warm hug when everybody started walking in, and like I felt so much more pride knowing that the group was around us.
Yeah, I would even say, like, similarly to Ian's point too, like, it felt good, it felt like a hug having people around us. There was a moment of intimidation still, even with supporters, like a giant crowd of supporters surrounding you, all saying something that isn't also directly your message. There's some like cognitive dissonance there, in a way that is like not bad, obviously, but it did also feel, it added to the pressure of it. There was in an interesting way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious for folks that were just kind of showing up in support and singing, how did it feel to be walking towards the students singing while they're chanting something else? Anyone want to share how that felt?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Feels good to have a purpose. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, so if sometimes like it would be better if you knew all the words, but having something like a song or a chant is unifying. It feels good to do.
I was going to say, it felt a little weird to be saying something different than what they were saying. Like, are we helping them, or they think we're trying to take over, or what are they feeling in that moment? Is it drowning them out?
Right. Yeah, and does that feel realistic? Like, how often do we see people at demonstrations singing or chanting different things, right?
I think when they started sitting down with us, that was where it felt more support, because we were saying different things.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like maybe in real life, someone would run up and be like, hey students, we're joining from this church. Can we join with you in chanting? And then maybe say, when you're done, would it be okay if we sang a song? So like maybe we would try to do some actual coordinating in the moment, but it was, in real life, maybe that wouldn't happen. It would get a little chaotic and it'd take a little bit till we figure it out.
Well, it just felt a little chaotic too, with the antagonists and the police officers, and everything's yelling, and I'm trying to hear the song, and that was real. That could happen. It could just be very chaotic. But finally, everyone's voices with the song came together and made that more unifying.
Even if you weren't singing the same words of the same song, I think just singing. Like, just keep singing. Don't worry about whether you're meeting what everybody else is doing. I thought it was somewhat empowering, actually, to be like in this big group and hopefully doing the right thing.
Someone I heard say that they didn't really have enough information about what was going on, so it shows that they really need to be prepared and a lot of information out so people know what they're doing. So I thought it was pretty exciting, really.
Yeah, and sometimes people do get swept up, and it's hard to be prepared for everything. So we do the best we can, and then sometimes we're just gonna have to get out there quickly without all the info. I'm curious, Jesse, how did it feel two questions. How did it feel for you being a police officer with all the chaos around? Did you feel agitated, or, and then also I'm curious, was there any like moment that you felt energy changing at any point?
I think it felt a little overwhelming when there was huge crowds around. And I think the energy sort of changed when more and more people started sitting down, because you're just like, okay, the numbers are clearly not in our favor.
And what did that make you feel or want to act a certain way?
Made me feel less inclined to keep going because, at some point you're outnumbered.
I think that's a really important realization, and once again, we're not being tactically prescriptive, but I do want to point out, I think there's something powerful about sitting down in particular that can de-escalate a scenario, and I also think, I personally like chanting and yelling, it gets out some aggression, but I also think that singing can have a particular effect and can be used strategically sometimes. But yeah, I think when people are walking and moving, it can feel kind of chaotic sometimes. But if a large group of people is sitting down and has a unified message together, it can add some stability. It's also just much harder to move people that are sitting. If you're standing, you're much more unstable. So it can sometimes be safer for everyone to be sitting together.
I was thinking a way to maybe add another component to the exercise is to have one of the students spray painting on the wall. Because when you go to a protest, you're not in control of every person. And so you have to figure out, well, what if you don't agree with something somebody does? It's the nature of it.
I think that's a really good point, and it feels realistic. And I think it's a tension and a challenge that we're going to have to learn to step into, that we're going to show up to demonstrations where people are doing things that make us uncomfortable, or maybe that we even disagree with. And it's possible for us to show up and be there and be who we are and hold that tension. So I think that's a really great point.
From the provocateur standpoint, it felt, very defensive, certainly so, but there was a lot of energy, confrontational energy that was present. And regarding the sitting piece, the de-escalators who came up to me physically were standing right next to me, which I felt myself responding even more confrontational. But when they sat, that was quite a different feel, and I didn't know how to respond to that as in a confrontation, so it expressed itself as trying to lampoon or to make fun of the sitting posture. It changed the dynamic.
I'm curious about the support roles. So we had the social media, the de-escalator, the marshals. What was that like for you all? And they were generally in this area. Yes?
For me, being I talked with the media, and I agree with you. I didn't know enough about the scenario. He was asking me, well, how long is this going to last, and what are they protesting, and where are you from, and all this, and I was like, I don't know how long it's going to last. I hope not very long. Not very knowledgeable.
Yeah, that feels pretty realistic, right? And it just shows how important it is to have a trained person who you can be like, ooh, I can answer that, but that person over there can say that to you, because we don't all have to be ready to speak to the media.
I just wondered if it would have made a difference if the church members had surrounded the kids and everyone had sat down. Would that have been more powerful? Because it seems the police would have had no way out either. But I don't know whether the police would have become more aggressive, or I'm just wondering.
I think it could be. I think it really depends on the situation. So it's hard to predict. But I think, I do think numbers matter, right? So more people deciding to sit down together. Police sometimes do decide just not to arrest people if they are like, oh, there's 300 people here, this is going to take us hours. So, so sometimes that can matter. There's someone over here.
So I was the person interfacing with the police, and my whole role, I felt like I was trying to understand why the police were there, and I kept trying to put doubts in their mind, or at least try to uncover what it was they were trying to pursue. And you know, you were great at just kind of, I'm just pushing through this, have this guy arrested, and it's like, what is this for? And I could see Jesse just kind of melted somewhere. He's just like, because he was just overwhelmed, not really understanding what the full goal was. It just felt like there was a force that came in and went, now what do we do? When all these people started surrounding him, so.
Yeah, and I honestly, in real life, I think if you did that to a police officer in that situation, you would get arrested in about, you would get taken, maybe not even arrested, but just detained pretty quickly. And I also wanted to say to some of the students who I was trying to arrest, but were like, I'm not getting up, you would have probably been forcibly picked up in that situation. And so it is something for us to think about. If you are planning on doing civil disobedience, it's really important to know how you plan to act. And it's okay to decide to sit and talk to an officer, but know that could result in them escalating. And so if you're planning on complying, then you should comply immediately. So just something to think about. One more and then we'll keep going.
So I was doing the social media and I realized I was kind of at the end and I was actually taking pictures and videos. So, and I was like, oh, wait, stuff is going up there. I've got to go record this and take pictures because this is important. And so then as someone was getting carried off, I was like, where are you taking there? Where are you taking them? You know, just following along and asking that question to be a witness.
Yeah, I think that is a really important role of a social media person or our photographer, videographer is to document what's happening, and depending on how you act, you can, sometimes police feel agitated, you can escalate the scenario if you get right up in their face, or if there's multiple people on the outskirts taking photo and video, sometimes that can de-escalate things. So it can go both ways, but either way, I think it's really important for people to be recording what's happening. So I'm sure we could debrief this for a while. Just to restate our goals again of why we did this, it was to get ourselves in our bodies and imagining how we might act in a real life scenario like this. And for us to, if we were a provocateur for the first time, to imagine, what does it actually feel like for someone else to show up and start yelling, can help us to imagine what we would need to do to de-escalate them. And so I hope this moved folks just a little bit, helped folks just a little bit to think about what our role might be and how we might act in one of these scenarios. So we're now going to move into our last part of the agenda, which is thinking about courage. And because today, just to recap, we started out by really getting in our heads and thinking about these big concepts of authoritarianism and this moment that we're in. Then we spent some time applying those lessons through a breakout discussion and actually talking about what we could tangibly do in our own communities to organize against authoritarianism. And then we applied those lessons physically and thought about what we physically might do and how it might feel for us. But to do all of this work, it takes a lot of courage. And courage is not just going to emerge on its own. It takes actual intentional cultivation. We actually have to cultivate courage and support our communities to have courage together to do this kind of stuff. And so we're calling that cultivation of courage courage rituals. And so the idea is that when we act out our values in our bodies, we switch from our analytical minds to our embodied reality. And when we're acting out our values with our bodies alongside other people, it can make us feel present, strong, and courageous, and together. And so doing this, these physical courage rituals are things that we recommend folks start doing regularly. And so this could be at a meeting you go to, it could be at church, something you do with friends, it could even be something you do online. But the idea is to integrate these practices into your life frequently to cultivate courage, especially in moments where you know that people around you or you yourself might be stepping into more risk. So I just thought of a few examples of what courage rituals could be, and then I'm curious if you guys have some that you can think of. So the first one I thought of is the idea of a courage candle. So asking members of a church congregation to come to the front during church and light a courage candle as a commitment to stepping into risk as a congregation. Through our faith in God and our community, we follow this light into the unknown and hold one another in courage. Singing for me is something that really does give me courage, especially during a demonstration. And so, but at church on Sunday, if you could think about having one song that you always sing, that's like your church's courage song. And if there's a moment that feels especially fraught, or where you know people in your church are stepping into risk, or you're welcoming someone back from doing something that took a lot of courage, you could sing a courage song together to hold them in courage as a community. This is another just like simple thing I thought of. Asking people to look around the room, make eye contact with one another, and say something like, "We're all in this together," or "I've got your back." Holding hands, so having everyone in your congregation hold hands and do a reading or some kind of mantra and reading together. So these are some ideas I thought of. I'm curious if anyone else can think of other rituals that you think could give you courage if you did them with other people. Yeah, shout it out. Yes, I love that. Give people a hug. What else? Courage prayer. Yeah, saying prayers together. Yeah, just being together, even if it's just online. Nice. Yeah, also just doing something that feels more courageous can make us feel more courageous.
This is practicing courage. A friend of mine said that he was going to put a Mexican flag on his bumper sticker so he would have an opportunity perhaps to talk to an officer or a nice individual when they stop him. It's kind of like during other rebellions with everybody wearing a star.
Yeah, and so I think sometimes practicing courage and taking risk can embolden you, right? So doing a small step can give you more courage. So I think we're going to do another courage ritual right now.
So I have right here what we're calling the West Coast Courage Candle, because this started in Pasadena, our first stop, and made its way up the coast in Nick's suitcase. It stopped at Fresno and San Francisco and now Portland, and we'll take it to Seattle with us. So we're going to light it, and should we sing a song? Yeah, and Crystal is going to lead us in a courage song.
That's the melody. So the song goes, courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. And the way we do this is I sing first word, courage, then you sing, you match my tone, courage, and then my friend, I'll sing it, and then I'll go like this, and then you match that. And then together we sing, you do not walk alone. And then when I'll point to me when it's my turn, I'll point to you when it's your turn. If I go like this, it means you're singing with me. Courage, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Just my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Freedom, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Portland, my friend, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home.
So that song was used in the South African anti-apartheid movement, and they would sing people's names as they were being taken off to jail. So that to me is a song that gives me courage, and it's a way we can even give individual people courage by singing their names, letting them know that they don't walk alone. So we're going to move into the last part of our agenda now. And so I just want to take a minute to just ground us in where we're coming from. So 2 years ago, at this time, Mennonite Action didn't exist. And 2 years later, we have grown into a movement across the US and Canada. We've got about 24 chapters across the country with thousands of people involved in our movement. And on this tour, Stop Alone, we've got over 30 stops, and somehow we keep adding a couple more, like our folks in Minnesota are like, can you just do one more training? So we're doing an extra one on Sunday in Minnesota, and we're adding more stops, and more folks are reaching out to join and ask to be chapters of Mennonite Action, so that's really exciting. And we see this work that we're doing is standing on the shoulders of a lot of communities. So earlier we talked about the civil rights movement, the Black freedom movement. So we feel like so many people have struggled ahead of us and done work for decades and decades, from Black folks in the South to indigenous communities resisting genocide here in the US, to Palestinians in Palestine, steadfastly standing up to genocide, and so many more folks. And so we see ourselves as part of this global struggle that is organizing against authoritarianism. And we're doing this as Mennonites and Anabaptists, and we're trying to figure out our role in this movement. And so the first thing I want to ask from folks tonight is to take out your courage commitment card and to take a second to fill it out and just to think about what you might be willing to give to this movement here in Portland. And we're going to we're going to collect these and hand them into the local Portland team so that we can strengthen the Portland chapter of Mennonite Action. And so sometimes folks are like, I don't know what skill I have to give. So, but a skill counts, like if you make a really good pot of chili, that's definitely a skill. Or if you like to do data entry, or if you are a massage therapist, everything counts, and everyone can contribute something. And that's really what we do in this movement. If you can give 20 minutes a week, if you can give 5 hours a week, we want you to be involved. And so just ask that you take a few minutes, a minute, and think about what you want to contribute. We've got some more if some people didn't get those. Yeah, raise your hand if you need one. Oh, this whole side over here looks like they need them. I'm curious, does anyone want to say something that they offered on their courage card? A skill that they wrote down? I think some more folks back there.
Two different ones. People are wondering if they're supposed to get both.
They're supposed to get both, yes. There's some folks back there that still need. What's that? Yes. Okay, anyone want to share what they wrote down on their courage card? No? Anyone want to share? Did you want to share, or do you need a card? Thank you so much, spiritual director and counselor who's willing to give time to people who are working on this. Thank you so much. It's amazing. Anyone else want to share something they feel like they can offer to this kind of work? Nothing too small or too big. Yes. What's that? Graphic design. That's awesome. Thank you. One more person? Communications coordination. Awesome. Thanks so much. And then folks got a second card also. So something really unique about Mennonite Action is that we are funded 98% by individual contributions, church contributions, and monthly donors. And I'm curious, do we have any Mennonite Action monthly donors in the room already? All right, we've got a couple folks in here. I want to invite Bill to come up and talk for a second about why he is a monthly donor to Mennonite Action. Give it up for Bill. Woo!
Those who know Bill doesn't talk publicly, so this is a rare treat. When Lisa Hughes asked me to talk for a minute or two about this, and not only did I have to speak publicly, but I had to talk about money, which is like the most taboo thing we can talk about. But in keeping with the spirit of the evening being courage, I'm going to muster mine and talk to you. It's going to be over in 3.5 minutes, I hope. So Chris and I donate $20 a month to Mennonite Action. We actually started in 2024 when we learned that Nick's collaborator, Adam, had quit his job as a staffer at the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., because he was so convicted by the Gaza situation that he wanted to devote full-time efforts towards ending the genocide there. And that really touched us, and we thought, damn, that takes a lot of courage for a guy to abandon his paycheck and just go out on faith on a mission like this. So we thought, we want to do what we could to support him. And as we've watched the group grow, we increased our donation, so we're now up to $20 a month. But even a small contribution really makes a big difference, because as you can gather from Emily and Nick, this is a small group. There are 5 of them. They work from home. They have essentially no overhead. They get a little administrative support by a nonprofit in DC called Nonviolence International, and it's through them that the credit card processing is done. Some of you may recognize them because Nonviolence International is also the sort of umbrella admin outfit that works with the Isaiah Project. The Isaiah Project is the outfit that sends blacksmiths around the country and collects weapons, guns, and converts them into garden implements. And so that's sort of a sibling here under the Nonviolence International umbrella that Mennonite Action is with. So Chris and I, we get solicited by lots of worthy causes that we've had some affiliation with in the past. They range from the familiar Mennonite agencies to the ACLU, to Oregon Wild, to Sisters of the Road, to Multiple Myeloma Foundation, to Oregon Public Broadcasting. And all of these have budgets that are many times larger than Mennonite Action. And so it makes a real difference to make a difference in their funding. But if half the people in this room were to sign up to give $10, $20, or $30 a month to Mennonite Action, the folks in this room would cover their budget for a week or two. Their budget is less than $500,000, and they've got a payroll of 5 folks, and as you can see from the map, a lot of traveling. That's an ambitious group, and they make a dollar goes a long way. The U.S. policy in Gaza, as Nick explained, is a manifestation of this Christian nationalism that seems to be sweeping the country. And Chris and I think it's critical that there be loud voices in opposition to Christian nationalism, particularly voices that speak from an authentically Christian perspective in which no category of people is supreme and nonviolence is foundational. And that's the viewpoint that Mennonite Action is spreading. Everyone everywhere is our neighbor, and violence isn't the answer. Individually, it's easy to get discouraged. We open the paper, and as Nick said, the bar seems to sink to new lows every day. We grow weary. But in community, our efforts become sustainable and more powerful. So, Ecclesiastes, there's a season for everything. I think there's a season for supporting different charitable organizations. Our picks have changed over the years, but I submit that in this era of growing Christian nationalism, this is the season for supporting a public, passionate Christian voice that is contrary to Christian nationalism, and I hope you'll join Kristen and me in authorizing a credit card donation to this worthy group. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing. So if you're looking at this chart behind me, I just want to explain it to y'all. So Mennonite Action is really unique in where our money comes from, and I want to be transparent about where it comes from. So the tiny little sliver that says foundation money, that's at 2%, our foundation money is from Mennonite Central Committee and Mennonite Church USA. Okay, so that's our foundation money. Then about 60% comes from individual contributions, and about 9% comes from churches, and then 31% comes from people that give an average of $30 a month. And our goal is to, by the end of the year, to increase that 31% to 50%. And so that in this time where foundations and large donors are getting attacked for supporting people that organize for Palestine, we can have a steady base of people that give monthly, just small donors that give monthly that can allow us to continue to do our work. And our monthly donors range from people that give $1 a month to $200 a month. And so before we set out on tour, we set a goal for different tour stops based off of how many people were signing up. And for this tour stop, we set a goal of 10 people becoming monthly donors to Mennonite Action. And I'm curious if anyone here would be willing to become a monthly donor today for any amount of money. We've got 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. 4, 5, 6. Oh my gosh, this is 7. 3 more? Well, I just want to say thanks to everyone. 8 over there, amazing. I want to say thanks to everyone who's willing to do that. It like truly honestly matters. It is, as you can see, where a really large portion of our budget comes from, and I'm just super grateful. So. Just lastly, I just want to say thank you all for coming out tonight. It's an honor to get to be a staff member and to do these trainings and to support folks across the country to do this work. And I know it's a weeknight and we're all doing a lot, so it means a lot that folks came out tonight to be in community together. Yes? Well, I think Paul has been helping to lead the chapter in Esther as well. And I think part of our goal in having this today is to help resource Paul and folks that have been leading the chapter to know who wants to get more involved. So we're going to hand all those Courage commitment cards off to them so that they can be supported to grow the chapter more here. The last thing I'll say is that we have t-shirts in the back. They're $30, but if you become a monthly donor for $10 a month, you can also have one that way. So we're going to close it out with one more song, and thanks so much for being here.
Let's stand and let's sing number 412, My Soul Cries Out. Let's sing verses 1 and 2. That's number 412.